Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen. With us for our program today, Assemblyman Will Barclay. Will Barclay represents the 120th Assembly District. That includes the counties of Oswego, Onondaga, and Jefferson. We want to thank you folks throughout the area for joining us. And Will Barclay, nice to see you.
Nice to be here, Mike.
We've got some catching up to do, some things going on at the state capitol, some major proposals that could impact businesses across New York State, proposals to increase the minimum wage. Sounds like a good idea on the one hand, but you get deeper into it and people have a different opinion on whether or not it is really such a good idea. Also, requirements for businesses to have paid family leave. We'll be talking about both of those in just a few minutes. But our last program, Assemblyman, we talked a little bit about your continuing efforts to keep open the FitzPatrick Nuclear Plant. If I can, let me take you back a few months. You guys had a huge rally of people from all throughout the area, the employees, the interested parties, all the folks who support the FitzPatrick plant. And you made some remarks. Let's take a brief look at some of the remarks you made that day to get this discussion started.
With the unanimity that we have with local business leaders, with the elected officials up here with me, and practically the whole community, we're sending a message today. We're sending a message to Albany, and we're going to send a message to Washington. And we're going to tell them, if you care about clean energy, you should care about the FitzPatrick plant and help us keep that open. The last thing I want to say, we also want to send a message to Entergy. I know the company knows this, but we also want to say this community supports the plan. Work with us to help us keep this plant open.
I remember one of the things that struck me as we had that discussion in our last program was the idea that if some communities were faced with the prospect of having a nuclear power plant moved into their community, there might be people up in arms saying, no, no, no. And here you are with one of these plants saying, don't close it. Right. We love it. We want to keep it.
Yeah, well, we do, frankly, for a number of reasons. One, obviously, it supplies a lot of jobs to our area. 615 people are employed at that FitzPatrick plant. They're all good-paying jobs. So just losing that amount of employment is problematic. But the spin-off from the plant is really incredible. I mean, I think that the Syracuse paper estimated to be $500 million if the plant was to close down in economic activity surrounding the plant. So it would really be catastrophic if we lose this plant. Since that time, I mean, that was a great rally. I think we had 1,000 people there, really there to show their support and wanting to keep the plant open. We've had ups and downs. We've had times when I'm very optimistic, thinking things are moving forward, and then I get pessimistic about getting things moving forward. Currently, right now, we're working on legislation, circulating legislation that I think would go a long ways to help keep the plant open. One of them is a very simple piece of legislation to provide a one-time tax credit for 1 year to whoever the operator of the plant is, whether it's Entergy that currently owns it or another operator, of $60 million. That's to provide a bridge until we put policies in place in New York State that recognizes nuclear generation as important as it is for New York State's energy policy, because it goes 24/7. It's extremely efficient, the most efficient electricity generation source that we have. It's something like 92% efficient, where the closest one is maybe natural gas or coal, or somewhere in the 40s. So it's very efficient, and it doesn't emit CO2. We hear a lot about government policy saying we have to limit our CO2 in the atmosphere. There's no CO2 emissions. So there's a lot of reasons, I think, from a policy standpoint, that we should support nuclear in New York State.
One of the things you hear all the time is, even though gas prices are now at the lowest they've been in years, you hear at the federal level, at that level of the debate, that the United States still needs to diversify its energy dependence on fossil fuels.
Right.
And this is like a perfect example of that.
Right. I think a lot of the environmentalists like to think that we can backfill everything in with wind and solar, and I don't think anybody really is against wind and solar necessarily, but realistically, it's not going to fill in for all the fossil fuels that we use in the U.S. And once you start closing down nuclear plants, that's just going to put more of a burden on the current system that they're trying to shut down all the fossil fuels. So if you want to have electricity, you want to have reliable electricity, which we need, obviously, in New York State and our country, nuclear's got to be a part of that. And I think it makes a lot of sense, frankly, for us to support nuclear power in New York State through a short time, ability. This is not a long-term solution. Sometime natural gas prices are going to go back up again. The economics of nuclear are going to start making more sense and the plant will run. But in the meantime, you can't just shut a nuclear plant down for a couple of years and then turn it back on. Once it's shut down permanently.
So you say it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride since that rally last October. Where are you right now? Are you on the optimistic swing or down on the pessimistic side?
Yeah, well, I don't. I'm an eternal optimist. Sometimes it's not as optimistic as I am at other times. So I'm still optimistic, but we still got a lot of work to do in order to keep it open.
All right, will you keep us informed in an upcoming program then as to where things are then?
Yeah,
all right.
We will.
Those other issues that I mentioned at the top of the program, some pretty heady stuff that the legislature is considering that would have a pretty big impact on the business folks of New York State. A minimum wage. Let's start with that one. I think that's probably the easiest to understand, and it's an issue that has been out there for a long time. In fact, New York State has raised the minimum wage, several times.
Well, just recently, went up in January too. Yeah. So the governor's proposing over a 5-year period to get it up to $15 an hour.
That's the new magic number, it seems, for minimum wage.
In my mind, it seems a bit arbitrary. Frankly, I don't know where. Other than there's groups out there that are pushing for 15, but why 15? And if you truly believe in that substantial of an increase of minimum wage, why not go to $20? If everything they say is true about raising the minimum wage, that will create. I think some are saying it's going to create jobs. I don't know how you can make that claim, or it's going to create economic activity that will build on one another. If that's the case, then why not do $20 to $25 increase minimum wage? This is one of the problems we have in New York State, frankly. Our cost of doing business in New York State is extremely high. Upstate New York has been suffering for a long time because of our high cost of doing business in New York State. Businesses don't want to stay here. It's not economical for them. So they're leaving the state, and people, for that matter. We continue to push policies in Albany that exacerbate that problem instead of making it better, and we put it under the guise of this is going to help business or help people, but time after time again, we find out it doesn't. I think the minimum wage is a perfect example of this. I don't think anyone's against helping the working poor. I think we all want to help the working poor. Raising the minimum wage isn't going to accomplish that. What it's going to do is cause more automation in facilities. They're not going to hire as many people, and frankly, I think ultimately they'll be laying off people. So all of a sudden you're going to have less people with employment, or employment rates going to go up. If we really want to help the working poor, we should increase the earned income tax credit. That directly goes to people that don't have the income coming in. A lot of the people on minimum wage, they may not be making a lot of money, but they're either in families that are making plenty of money, or it's an entry-level job. Young people get in and often are covered on the minimum wage, where they have other sources of income. By just raising the minimum wage, is kind of a blanket raising the minimum wage, is going to cause higher unemployment. If we did the earned income tax credit, that would directly go to those people that didn't have that other income, with other family members supporting them or whatnot. So it's a much cleaner way to do it. Maybe, anyone could be open to some increase in the minimum wage. I'm not even sure that's the appropriate thing to do. But going to $15 an hour, that I think would put us, I don't know, probably the highest in the country, or maybe there are a few other cities have a $15 minimum wage, which I don't know. Seattle, for instance, I noticed they're having some employment problems because people are laying off people there because they can't afford to pay their wage. So I did a survey in my district, and we had an overwhelming response, which was nice that I guess people are concerned about it. And I bet it ran 90-95% opposed to the minimum wage, and almost to T, any of the business owners that answered and said inevitably it'll either force them to shut their business down. These are small business owners with 2 or 3 employees, or at the very least they're going to lay off people. So it just seems this is a problem we have in New York, just a complete wrong direction of trying to help employment in New York State, try to improve the economy. This is just one more headwind now business owners are going to have to run against in order to try to be successful in New York.
A disconnect, if you will, as to how things really work in a free market. There was a proposal a year ago to initiate a $15 minimum wage just for fast food workers.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that happened.
It did. I mean, so
it was done without legislative approval, though.
Yeah, that's even more galling, I suppose. But for a number of reasons, there's a kind of an antiquated law in the books that allows the governor to direct the Department of Labor to come up with a wage board and determine what the minimum wage should be for certain specific industries. And they came up for restaurant workers, fast food workers essentially, and came up with the idea that $15 is what they have to pay their fast food workers. And I think that's going to be, it's now implemented. I think it's scaled to go up over a number of years.
So you've created a false economy
Yep.
and an inequity in how minimum wage is set up throughout the workplace. So
yeah, that's
so
bad
maybe
enough.
people that are working in a convenience store might say, well, why would I want to be working here where if I go to the fast food restaurant, my minimum would be so much higher?
Right. Or can you imagine some gas stations have the fast food right in the gas station, so presumably right in the same store you could have someone,
Two different minimum wage employees.
Yeah. But that's I sponsor legislation to change so they can't do that going forward. It really should be done open with plenty of debate by the legislature, which obviously our duties are to set law for New York State, and that should include the minimum wage. We shouldn't have a governor to be able to do any of this unilaterally. I think that's problematic.
So then there's this other issue, paid family leave. Explain that to the folks watching, what that proposal would do, and we're down to our last few minutes here already.
Yeah, so this is a proposal. Is there a lot of the governors also idea of pushing this, and again, it sounds good on the why shouldn't we allow employees to pay in so when they have to take time off for childbearing or an ill relative, they can be paid during that. They claim it's going to be a fully employee paid-in system. The problem with New York, so the proposals are out there. Maybe we could be open to some idea of doing this, but unfortunately for New York, we of course take maybe an idea and then put it on steroids and make it the worst idea that you could do for the rest of the country. For instance, ours would be a 12-week family paid leave. I think California, and there might be one other state that has it, is half that time, 6 weeks. So if you're a small, no exemption for small employees. So then again, if you have 1 or 2 employees, they could be out for 12 weeks. What do you do? There's certainly going to be a cost to employers for this. The amount that you pay in is going to be very questionable whether that's going to be sufficient to cover the amount to pay out for the paid leave. And it's also done on a flat basis, so all employees are going to be paying into the system the same amount. However, you get back based a percentage on whatever your wage is. So higher wage employees are going to get more money out even though they're paying the flat. So it's almost a regressive tax, you could say, on certain employees. If you're a low wage employee, you're paying the same much amount as high wage employees, but you're not getting that same amount out. So again, there is a lot of problems with this bill, and I imagine if you polled it, people might be, well, sounds like a good idea. Who doesn't want to help out an employee that has a sick relative?
Right, or a baby.
And I think, frankly, most businesses, they want to have their employees happy, and they try to work around it. Now to start mandating it for such a lengthy time, provide no exemption for small employers, and then also have this kind of paying in structure that's wholly inadequate, presumably, that it's not going to cover the amount, and then have it so everybody pays a flat rate in, doesn't get the flat rate out. So there's just a whole host of problems with this, and this is one of those things you got to look at the details and really understand the impact it's going to have on business, because I'm going to say it's going to be another headwind in New York State for small businesses.
And bigger companies usually have these sorts of things built in. Again, it's the smaller businesses that we're talking about, the mom and pop shops, or 12 employees or less, that maybe are going to be left scratching their head trying to figure out how they're going to accommodate it.
Yeah, right. Yep.
That's going to be it for us today. We'll be watching these as they percolate here at the state capitol and probably make their way onto the legislative floors, the Assembly and the Senate for debate. Will Barclay, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you folks, too, for spending your time with us. We'll hope to see you all soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.